Welcome, everyone. My name is Tasia Rachiski. I'm a rare disease patient and a committee member here at Rare England. Thank you for joining this session on legal advocacy. As we all know, this is a very important topic for rare disease families. This session is hosted by Lisa Deck, RNE's cherished board member and the host of the World of Rare Disease. Lisa herself is a rare disease patient diagnosed in 2015 with Moyamoya disease after an 18-year diagnostic odyssey. Lisa is also the founder and director of Sisters at Heart, a nonprofit that improves the lives of those affected by heart disease and stroke, a former Go Red for Women National Spokesperson for the American Heart Association, and currently serves as an advocacy board member for the American Heart Association in Boston and Southern New England. Lisa frequently lobbies and advocates for the rare disease community at the local, state, and federal level, and has participated in Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. She has been an inspiring voice in raising awareness for heart disease, stroke, Moyamoya disease, and these past couple of years has broadened her focus to the wider rare disease community. Today, she looks forward to sharing her experiences and legislative tips with you and answering your questions. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. I am going to get started by sharing my screen. Hopefully this works. And then I'm going to present. And are we all seeing that? Tasia, can you just let me know if you're seeing my slide? Okay, great. So hi, everybody. As Tasia said, my name is Lisa Deck, and I am a stroke survivor, a rare disease patient advocate, and a board member now with Rare New England. Today, I'm excited to talk to you about legislative advocacy. First, we are going to discover what advocacy is in its various forms. We are going to learn to tell your patient story in a very concise way. We are going to master a process called the 60-second advocate. And finally, we are going to talk about advocacy and how it has changed during COVID. So I'm giving my presentation assuming that we have a mix of new advocates and experienced advocates, and it's hard to kind of make it applicable to everybody. So we're going to start with the basics, but I will talk about how you can make this part of your life if you are an experienced advocate. But let's start from the beginning. What is advocacy? The definition of advocacy is public support for or recommendation of a specific cause. Advocacy seeks to ensure that people can have their views and wishes genuinely considered when decisions are being made about their lives, defend and safeguard their rights, and have their voice heard on issues that are important to them. And as you know, in today's world, all of these are extremely important. So why should you care as an advocate and as a rare disease stakeholder? So let's talk about the large scale. So how does this impact others? One, you are able to influence legislators with advocacy. You're able to contact people who are making decisions about you. Secondly, you can impact major change. Sure, if you do something at the local level, it can mean a big difference in your community. But if you want major change, systemic change, you have to go to the highest levels. So that is a way that advocacy can help you. And finally, you can get powerful results. I have to tell you, when I first started becoming an advocate 2 decades ago, I didn't even know what advocacy was. And I had no idea that all of the work I was doing in my day-to-day life was good and meaningful, but going to the larger scale, that was what I needed to do to make major change. But in doing that, I had so many benefits. So personally, how can that influence you? I'd like to say it can empower advocates. You can empower other people by sharing your story, by talking about what you do, because you are inspiring and that can make other people care about what you're doing. This is available to everybody. You do not have to be a fundraiser. You do not have to, have money to give. It's just your voice. It's sharing who you are with others, and that has an impact. It can also feel really good when you share your own story. It's a platform. Sure, you may write a book, you might contribute to articles, but what about talking to your legislators? That is a really unique, cool way for you to take your story. It's hands-on learning. For example, as you go to a state house or you go to Capitol Hill, you're going to learn as much from the people you're talking to, whether it be the people next to you advocating with you or the legislators. It's a great learning opportunity and it keeps your brain going. And finally, it's a way to build connections. I love that I get on these calls and I know people, and so much of that has come from advocacy. Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I will believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. This is why I started the 60-second advocate. That was a North American Indian proverb. But in doing this, I know that my story matters, and I think that yours does too. But I wanted to put it into a format, a way that you could learn yourself to do this. It's called the 60-second advocate, and I'm about to teach it to you. If you want, you can take out a piece of paper and jot down some notes, because this is something, if we were in person, I would do a practice session, but because we're short on time and we are virtual, I'd love you to take some notes and work on this on your own. So grab your pen and paper. Okay, the 60-second advocate. This is a concise way to convey your message and to tell your story in an advocacy setting. I'm doing a 60-second version, so that means that you will learn it within a minute. You can extend this to 5 minutes, you can extend this to 10 minutes, depending on the situation. So let's get started. First, we are going to talk about, I'm just closing one thing. We are going to talk about the personal story. So if you want to go into a legislator's office and you have this minute, you're with 10 other people, you're in the senator's office, and you realize that she's already checking her watch, she wants you to get going. First, you're going to tell your personal story. I'd say that should take about 25 seconds. So what you want to do is introduce yourself by name and your location. It is so important. And I have been to so many meetings where people don't do this. Literally, your legislator is sitting there listening. Are you a constituent? Because if you are, they work for you. They want to hear where you're from. So you should say, hi, I'm Lisa Deck. I'm from North Attleboro, Massachusetts. That is the first thing that you want to say. Next, you want to share your personal medical story. So this is hard, right? Because potentially it covers a lifetime of obstacles that you want to explain. How do you condense it to be significant and relatable? Well, what I want you to do is I want you to think about ways to do that. You can tell chronologically. You can tell a funny story highlighting facts. You can tell a sad story with a meaningful lesson. You might also want to have a quote in a story, but you want to do this briefly. You want to make it so that it's relatable. I also encourage people to talk about your health experience in a medical or emotional way. If you are a doctor, you might want to talk about that one story that matters the most to you. If you want to be a patient, you want to talk about how did that impact you emotionally? Were you scared? Were you frightened? Were you devastated? Use those words because I think that's how you connect to people. And finally, you want to highlight the most relevant and compelling facts. So this takes some practice. You need to think about it. For me, I've been a patient for 20 years, but I was able to get my story down to 25 seconds. And I'm not going to do it here, but in person, I often will tell my story in 25 seconds as an example to you. So if that's something you want to hear sometime, I can direct you to a video of that. But in terms of time, I'm not going to do that today. Now I want to talk about your link to the issue. So why are you lobbying? Are you lobbying for rare disease? Are you lobbying for heart disease? What is your issue? And so I think it's important to talk about your why. Why are you here? So you want to think about the issue that you want to connect with. If you're in person, this might be something that you talk directly to him. There's many different ways to advocate, but thinking about the issue. Is it rare disease funding? Is it talking about research? Is it talking about access to healthcare? You need to figure out that issue. You also then need to talk about when did you realize this? So you want to dig a little bit deeper so you have some real personal information, but you want to connect it with the issue. You want to explain that you are an expert because as a professional or as a patient, you are an expert. And I think telling people that is important because you've lived it. So recognize your worth, get the issue, and connect together. And finally, you want to talk about how this issue not only affects you, but your community and patients. So again, you want to determine what the issue is, how does it impact you, connect your story with it, And finally, make it bigger than yourself. This is all very important. Finally, it's the action item. What is the action item? You are telling and asking the legislator what you want to happen. So you want to tell them exactly what to do and how to do it. So this might be, please co-sponsor the Stop Stroke Act. It might be, can you please tell your colleagues about this sign-on letter and have them all sign on? It may also be something as a vote. Please vote for Senate Bill 4021 tomorrow. You want to make it short, sweet, and specific. This is your hook. So again, this is a multifaceted process, but in the end, you want to take everything you've explained and get to that point. You want to tell them exactly what to do. This is the last thing you will say. You've laid the groundwork, so make it meaningful. That is a brief discussion of my 60-second advocate. And I think it is so critical to have that at your disposal. From there, we can talk about how to expand that, and I'll get to that in a moment. I want to talk a little bit about the new COVID-19 advocacy landscape. Let's talk about what's happening. I do want to point to the two pictures here. These were actual live pictures. This was the last advocacy I did prior to the shutdown. So I was fortunate to be able to share my personal story of a diagnostic odyssey at NIH on Rare Disease Day. That was in person on February 29th. 2 weeks later, we would be home. And the week before, I was doing a filming of the World of Rare Disease with our earlier speaker, Annette Hines. So we were out there, we were doing things. And I think all advocates, so much energy and connection come from that. But now we're in COVID, and what has changed? Our advocacy toolbox is extremely limited. No longer can we do Hill visits. No longer can we go up to the State House. In-person activities have been changed. Lawmakers are focused on the pandemic. So it seems like so many of our initiatives and our priorities have been put down because so much is focused on the pandemic and dealing with ways to help people during this terrible time. So that is a challenge that we are all facing. Rare advocates are at a higher risk. I am a rare disease patient. I did not leave my house for many weeks. Now, when I do, I'm extremely cautious. And I think so many of us are in those situations because we are at a higher risk than everyday people. So I think it's so important to recognize that and to remember that we have a high risk population. So talking about advocacy, we have to keep that in mind. And the final thing I want to keep in mind is the life essentials are most important. So while we're talking about advocacy, and it can feel like the most important thing if we are trying to advocate for rare disease research and we want there to be a clinical trial, and those are very important. But right now there are people who have illnesses, there's people who are dying, there's people who have lost their jobs. And I think that in this discussion of legislative advocacy, we need to keep that in mind. But I would like to talk about some new techniques. And how many of us are sitting here all day, every day on Zoom calls? This is what is happening. So I want to talk a little bit about how it has changed and as ways that we can make a difference. I like to refer to Ross on Friends, and when he yells pivot, because that's what we are all doing. And I think that so many organizations and people have done such a great job. So let's talk a little bit about it. First of all, you need to reinvent your advocacy toolbox. So instead of in-person visits, you're doing Zoom calls, virtual calls. Look at this conference. We had plans to make this a in-person event. And while I love that energy and I love learning from other people, we are finding new ways. My City Med has this excellent option to be able to, virtually have a conference that feels real. So I think we're figuring that out. I think as we look at technology, it's enabling us to continue our advocacy. So as an individual advocate or working with an organization or with a healthcare facility, we just have to kind of reinvent what it is we do. We want to be solution oriented. We know that it is hard for people to take what we're saying when it's not about the pandemic right now. So we want to be sure that we are looking at solutions and bringing those to our legislators. So we don't want to just introduce the idea. We definitely want to talk about the fact that here's a solution to it. So maybe it's gathering all our letters and delivering them together. Maybe it's, instead of, having multiple phone calls, we go into one phone call with multiple things together. We want to have a solution that we present to our legislators. Letting your advocates know you care. And this is more of a personal feeling, but I think it's so important in today's society. So many rare disease patients are left in, and I've been very fortunate to have organizations that I volunteer with reach out to me. I'm an advocate, I'm a volunteer, and they recognize that things are changing. And I think that's so important. And it's kind of just goes with kindness, but just letting people know that we see you, we know you're in, and we recognize that. I also think that goes for legislators. Let them know that while you may not be up on Capitol Hill or you may not be at the State House, you're still here, you still care. And I think that's so important. And finally, as we talk about losing jobs, losing lives, I think it's important to be sure to recognize kindness, recognize human care for each other. But I think in doing that, we want to identify relevant issues and prioritize them. So if you're going in to talk to somebody on a virtual call, feel free to mention that you realize that the pandemic is first and foremost right now, but you have other things that you think is still so important and it's worth mentioning. So I encourage you to do that. The one other thing that, when you talk about legislative advocacy and some new techniques, I think I do also want to talk just a little bit about some of the best practices when we talk about live face-to-face meetings. We want to talk about making sure people have call-in information on time, consider time zones, be prepared for technical difficulties and how to handle those. You always want to have a backup plan, mute your microphone, be sure to dress appropriately. So all of these, you want to be sure your organization or you as an individual are providing a professional opinion. You're going to have a solution and a results-oriented, solution-oriented ask, and you want to not be tone deaf during this time of crisis. You want to be relevant. So let's talk about forms of advocacy. There are some that we have known for many years, and there are some that are becoming new and with increased focus. So first, let's talk about emails and letters. So when you're doing an email or a letter, letters seem to have gone by the wayside, but even emails, you want to be sure that it is effective. So it is never going to be as effective as a face-to-face meeting. However, it's very easy to do. So sending an email is very easy. It may not impact change individually unless you have a personal relationship with that legislator. Yet, by getting many emails or tallying them all together, that is a great way to make a difference and get to the legislator. Calls or voicemails. So this is a better way to advocate, calling directly to the office. Sometimes you'll talk to the legislator yourself. Sometimes you might just get an aide, and that is just as important because often they are the ones who are handling the issues. So by doing calls, one call can make a difference. If you have a well-placed call with a well-placed connection to that legislator, it is very important that you use that well. The volume of calls often matters. So if you're able to reach out to your community and to your advocates and ask them to make a call on your behalf, and they all ask for the same thing, that will get through to a legislator and make impact and change. And finally, in-person visits. These can be in the forms of in-district visits. You can provide testimony. There might be summits. There are also special events. There's Hill Days. I laugh at this picture down here. I am in the White House Oval Office for a Twitter chat. This was probably about 8 years ago. And I must admit that at the time, I didn't even know what Twitter was, but somebody asked me if I wanted to be part of it in the Oval Office. And I quickly said yes, because I had never been in the Oval Office before. So it was very exciting to be a part of something like that. And I learned how to use Twitter. So in-person visits truly are the most effective because you are there in person. And now when you're in person, you have the tool of the 60-second advocate. And often if you haven't been to a Hill Day, you go with the cohort of people. There are 5 to 10 of you in a meeting. And so that's what got me the idea of the 60-second advocate, because you generally have a minute. Maybe you have 3 minutes, but whatever it is, you need to be concise. You need to connect it to the issue and you need to make an ask. So that's where that idea came from. Let's talk a little bit about virtual meetings now. And again, this is the new way of the world. I have seen virtual meetings happen for some of the national organizations, for some of the regional organizations as well. It's just a way to meet with your legislator virtually. There's also ways to meet with your fellow advocates to talk and come up with ideas. And I think that this is a great option because years ago, this wasn't an option. So legislative advocacy, of course, in person is better, but a virtual meeting is face-to-face and it can make you connect with the people you're talking to. And let's talk about social media. And that has definitely grown over the years. It is a little bit less effective. However, kind of like emails and letters, the more you do, the better it is. Techniques that are important is if you can directly comment to your legislator on social media, that is something that they or their staff should see. It's also important to use hashtags, or if you are aware if there's a hashtag. So for example, in Massachusetts in the State House, there is a hashtag called MA policy, and a lot of the politicians follow that. So if you are able to have some information like that, that is important. And quantity matters. So if you have many people tweeting or sending messages on a social media platform with a similar message, that can matter greatly. I'm just checking my time. So advocacy outlets, and I just want to mention these as resources to you. Great things are done by a series of small things brought together. I have been part of the heart disease and stroke advocacy world for 20 years, and there is great connection there, and there is camaraderie with your fellow survivors and doctors and researchers, but never have I seen such need for togetherness as I have in the rare disease space. Diagnosed with Moyamoya 5 years ago, I fell into the rare disease space. And I quickly realized that together we are stronger. And I think that so many organizations are recognizing that. There are patients out there that I have met, that I have talked to, when there's 1 or 2 patients with that genetic disease. And I think working together, we truly have a way to help each other. So here I want to mention some of the resources that might be at your disposal for advocacy, for legislative advocacy in particular. Regional rare disease organizations, like Rare New England. We are involved with state and federal advocacy. On the state level, we are working in collaboration with other organizations to get a rare disease council bill passed. So that is a way, if you want to get involved, reach out to us. We would love to have your participation. I know there's NERGN and there's NEHA. Those are some other regional organizations. And I would encourage you to reach out to them if this is something you're interested in. There are also national organizations. NORD is who we collaborate with. They are at the national level and they have advocacy options all over the country as well. And so finding different organizations to work with and collaborate with is something so important in this space. Global Genes is another organization that provides training, and especially in advocacy in many different forms. They have a lot of resources available. Eurotis is for Europe. So that is a national European organization. So I encourage you to check that out. State or disease-specific rare disease organizations. For example, the Moyamoya Foundation Company or the Pennsylvania Rare Disease Committee. There are different organizations for your disease. And if there isn't, maybe it's something you want to collaborate with other people, because working together for something that can help your disease-specific group is so important. And finally, advocacy outlets, look online. Go via email, social media, tweet chats. There's so many things you can do, and so much of it is involved with legislative advocacy. That is all I have for you today. I'm very proud of myself for keeping it to 25 minutes. I had to get rid of some things, but I am now willing and able to answer any questions or comments.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Such great practical tips for advocacy. You just have such a wealth of knowledge, so thank you for sharing with us. We have a few questions. The first is, how does the 60-second technique apply or maybe change for advocates that are not patients themselves, but supporting a cause or a patient they know?
Absolutely, great question. And often when I present this, it is to patients, but for a professional or a organization, I think it applies the same. I think your personal story may not be your health story. It may be how you came about to become part of this field. It can be talking about your experience in the field. Maybe you had a rare disease patient that you had this issue with, or maybe because when you were young, you decided to follow this course of action. So I think it's making it personal to you. Again, for me, it talks about my personal story, but I think as a medical professional, as a volunteer, if you are advocating on behalf of a specific topic, there's a chance that you have a personal connection. So again, it can be your professional relationship to it, your medical relationship. But if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to walk you through it too, because I really enjoy the 60-second advocate. So happy to work with anybody who has some questions.
Great. The next question we have is, do you know of any important bills currently in session now, either in New England or on the national level?
So I know on the national level, I think there are bills. Oops, excuse me. Sorry. I'm just trying to fix my screen. On the national level, I believe there are always kind of bills that are being worked upon. A lot of that has to do with access or clinical trial, specialties for that. The biggest thing right now that we are aware of in the rare disease space in Massachusetts, there is a rare disease bill. We are trying to get it passed so that there is a rare disease council in our state. And many other states are working on that too. What I would encourage you to do is, again, reach out to us and we can put you in touch with people in your state. If you're in Massachusetts, we have that information. On the national level, I think right now, again, there are things going on. I am not well versed on that because I am not currently involved in that. I was up on Capitol Hill in February for Rare Disease Week, and we lobbied on different things, but I believe many of them have taken the back seat right now because of the pandemic. Rare Disease Legislative Associates is a great organization, and on their page, on their website, you can find a lot of the different bills that are being worked on right now.
Great. And then one other question, just from myself, actually, is a lot of the times they say to do kind of research before going into meet with a legislator. Do you have any advice on kind of tailoring, what you're saying and what research to do on that particular person that you're speaking to and trying to advocate to?
That is a great question. Thank you. Yes, I think it's twofold. So there is the one side as an advocate, you need to know the bill that you're asking for. So I'm very lucky. A lot of the times it's working with an organization who has people who are finding that information for you. But if you go in as an individual, look up, what you're looking for, find out about it. You can read about what the bill is online. You can also do the research yourself, say it is on pre-existing conditions. So you can kind of Google pre-existing conditions, see where it happens. The other side that I think you mentioned, and that's talking about being a really educated advocate, is knowing if there is a connection that you might share with your legislator. So it's doing a little background on that legislator. It might be, just looking to see where did they go to school, what did they study. You might be able to look up news articles and see, have they ever done a walk for a chronic illness? And that might be a connection. So I think that is a great way to go in and be educated, connect with them on a personal level. And I know, for example, I used to advocate in Rhode Island, and one of the senators grew up with my parents. They were kids together. They played baseball. And so when I would do my introduction, I would say, hi, I'm Lisa Deck, formerly Lisa Dehe, and I'm from Warwick, Rhode Island. And I believe my dad played baseball with you growing up. And it was just that instant, oh yeah, I know the Behes. And that's a very nice connection to make. And it gives you just that little bit of knowledge walking into it. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. We're going to wrap up and head to our next session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.